Your basic rights as a human being are not stripped from you once you enter the doors of a hospital. Several weeks ago, I posted a video sharing about how when we were in the NICU with Marcelly, we had a chaplain come into our room after we had requested explicitly for privacy. For context, we had just received her official diagnosis of lissencephaly, so that was a lot for us to process. I was in the middle of pumping when we got that diagnosis. It was a pod setup. We didn't have a private patient room. So after we received that diagnosis, and we were obviously upset, the nurses said, "Hey, what can we do for you guys?" And we said, "We just want a private space. Is there a conference room or somewhere that we can go to process this information alone and where I can finish pumping?" Why do I have paint on this shirt? So they escort us to this private conference room that is attached to the whole NICU pod. Why we couldn't have gone there to have that discussion with the neurologist who was giving us our diagnosis, I will never understand, because it was 30 feet from Marcelly's pod. But whatever, they escort us to that room and they're like, "Take all the time you need. Do you need anything else?" We just reiterate, no, we literally just want some privacy. We just need a minute to process this information. I am not lying. Within minutes, and I am full tears, I am pumping, my breasts are out, actively trying to pump and finish, and I'm crying and the whole thing. We get a knock on the door, and this chaplain comes in the room and says, "I heard we just got some bad news." What? And she's standing there awkwardly waiting for us to respond. And I'm so angry that I'm afraid I'm gonna snap off. So I just don't say anything. I just look at the floor. I'm quickly trying to cover myself up. And Josh senses that I am so triggered and just angry that we've had this blatant disrespect of our privacy. Because here's the thing, a lot of people have said in previous videos that I've done about this, "Oh, the chaplain didn't know." And initially, I genuinely do believe that. I think that maybe she didn't know. And my initial frustration was with the nursing staff. She would have had to have been escorted to that private space to even know where we were. Somebody called her without our permission and escorted her to that space after we had explicitly said, "No, we don't need anything, we just want to be alone." So initially my frustration was not with her, it was with whoever it was, nursing staff or otherwise, who had escorted her there after we had expressed that we wanted privacy. But then Josh says, "No, we'd like to be left alone." She leaves. She comes back a few minutes later just to check back in and is like, "Here you go, here's some water." And here's the thing, I know people are gonna be like, "Oh my gosh, that's so nice," and blah, 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 but that's not what we asked for. If I go to a restaurant and I ask for fettuccine Alfredo, and you bring me chicken Parmesan, and I get upset that you've brought me chicken Parmesan instead of fettuccine Alfredo, I mean, that's justified, right? Why is it that when people explicitly say, "This is what would be helpful for me in this moment," particularly in moments of grief, why is it that people get so irritated when those requests are ignored and we bring it to attention? You've completely disrespected my autonomy, and you're mad that I'm bringing that to attention and trying to correct it. So I posted a couple videos about this across my different platforms. And on one platform in particular, you can probably guess which, I had so many people come back and say, "You are entitled, you just need to accept that they were trying to help. They're just trying to do their job. And in the hospital, you don't get privacy. You're not entitled to privacy. What are you complaining about?" And here's what I've determined. We as a society have become so accustomed to our privacy being disrespected, to our autonomy being disrespected. We become so accustomed to that, and we can't handle the cognitive dissonance that occurs when we recognize that that is not in our best interest. We cannot handle the fact that someone who was supposed to do no harm did us harm by creating more trauma. And so in order to handle that cognitive dissonance, we just don't address it at all. And as a society, develop this idea that in hospitals, we are no longer entitled to privacy. And now let me be clear. I understand that in care settings, people have to do their job. But when did it become appropriate when a patient explicitly asks for time to grieve, for time to process information, for time to just be alone? When did it become appropriate for us to completely disregard their requests and deem them incapable of advocating for themselves? It is not entitled for a patient or a caregiver to say, this is what would be most helpful for me right now, or this is what I need. Even outside of situations in which you're dealing with grief and loss, anytime we go to the hospital, I very respectfully and clearly tell doctors what our needs are, what our frustrations are, because even though they are trying to do their job, they're human. Even though they have so many patients to care for, my child is my child. She's my world. My number one job is to protect her, to keep her safe. And if we don't express what we need or our concerns, how are medical providers supposed to know? A lot of people asked, well, did you report it to the hospital? And we were processing a lot at the time. I want to say I submitted a form online at some point, but honestly, I have no idea. I was criticized for posting about it on social media. People saying, oh, well, how could you request for privacy and then post this on social media? So hypocritical. Why don't you just take it to the hospital instead of blasting on social media? And what people don't realize is, one, I didn't name the hospital. I called out a behavior. And even if I had submitted a form regarding the situation, I probably wouldn't have heard back. I did hear back, though, from chaplains who saw that video, who then forwarded it to chaplain forums where further discussion was inspired and where they committed to using that video for improving chaplain education and bedside manner. Advocating for your needs does not make you entitled. It means you're using your voice. And if that makes people uncomfortable, good. Because change never came from a place of comfort. Your basic rights as a human being are not stripped from you once you enter the doors of a hospital. And all of the providers there should be committed to doing no harm. It's about time we started caring about people just as much, if not more, than we care about policies and procedures. I recognize that this video might still get some backlash. That is, if it gets pushed by the algorithm at all. But I care deeply about providing people with differing perspectives and educating people on what medically complex motherhood is really like. So if you're interested in these discussions and learning more, come join this community. My username is Joyful and Rising across all social media platforms. And I send a newsletter out every Sunday. Thanks for being here, and I hope you'll join us.